Welcome to the Gridiron Unfiltered podcast, powered by Recon Sports, the show where we take a deep dive into the world of sports performance. I'm your host, Danny Davis, and today we're diving into two important topics: the difference between quality versus quantity when it comes to fueling for athletic performance, and then what training looks like after sports, how you shift your focus to health and longevity versus training for game day. We've got the perfect guest to walk us through this: a former Division I athlete, West Point football graduate, strength coach, registered dietitian, and the founder of The Forge. Corey Hobbs, welcome to the show.
Danny, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So let's start with this. What would you say is the difference between a nutritionist and a dietitian? Are they the same thing, or what should fans understand about what the difference between the two are?
They are not the same thing. It's a really good question, and it gets very confused and convoluted. Essentially, anyone could call themselves a nutritionist. Like, you just go do a course on nutrition. I'm a nutritionist. And there are some regulations and laws around that, but for the most part, it's less regulated between nutritionist and dietitian. A dietitian, there's a national governing body who regulates, you have to take a test, you got to have certain credentials, you got to meet certain internship hours. It's a lot longer of a process, and there's more in depth. And I'll also add on to that, it's like any profession, right? There are good nutritionists and bad nutritionists who are just spitting snake oil and selling slinging supplements. There are also great dietitians and bad dietitians, and so it's really important that you find a good one and don't just take the credential as a stamp of approval either.
Interesting. So now that we have a baseline between those two, you and I were having a great conversation the other day about the quality versus quantity of food in college sports. And my mind went to these big dining halls that are magnificent nowadays with endless buffets and just immaculate facilities. But what's really going on? Like, what is going into the food? What type of food is this? So what would you say is the biggest tension between the food quality and the food quantity when it comes to fueling athletes at the college level?
Yeah, I will say it's largely going to depend on the dietitian on staff. It's going to depend on the resources available to the individual program. Programs with more money are going to be able to just throw more at the problem, essentially. But one thing I've seen, and I saw this a lot, doing my internship to become a dietitian too, you could look at hospitals even, and that's the place where you go to quote unquote get healthy. But the food they serve there is garbage. And so in a situation where you're trying to get someone healthy, you're serving food that's going to drive up inflammation and ultimately probably slow the healing process. In reality, we could use food as medicine and heal the body. If you give the body what it needs, it tends to take care of you. Now, the common practice again, this is not everywhere, so I'm going to throw a blanket statement out there, but I'll preface it by saying there are some really great dietitians and nutritionists who focus on quality over quantity, and there's a relationship component to it, and you have to get to know the individual, and they have to trust you. There's a lot of things that I understand. There's a lot of give and take between these dietitians and the athletes and the programs that they work for. But I will say health sets the baseline for performance. If you're not healthy, you won't be able to perform well, right? So if I'm someone who's getting sick all the time, I'm getting injured all the time, a nutrition could play a huge role in that, and in preventing that in the first place. Obviously, a good strength training program, all of your habits, like you're getting 8 hours of sleep, all that stuff's going to play a big role too. But one thing I've seen a lot is, a calorie is a calorie. And so no matter what, we're throwing Skittles at them at halftime, we're throwing gummy bears at them at halftime. There's a lot of high fructose corn syrup, stuff that, okay, I get it. Like, if you want sugar in their system, there are absolutely better options that are going to still be quick to eat, quick digested, quickly available as a resource for the body to use. But just to say you're not going to buy something because an athlete won't eat it, I'm fairly confident. And we saw this at Army, right? We ate what was provided for us. There was no, and I know West Point and these service academies are also a unique situation, but at the end of the day, what's available, and if you can control the environment is the biggest thing in terms of nutrition. I see this a lot now. Like, if you have crap food around, you're going to eat crap food. But if you have better options around, you're going to eat those better options, especially in a situation where you're going to eat here in front of me, and then we're going to the weight room or we're going to practice. I have a lot more say in what's going. Now, you might fight me on it. You might fight me tooth and nail. And then there is that give and take, like, hey, just try the eggs instead of the bagel today. Let's see how you feel. Or like the eggs with your bagel. Like, let's just add a little bit of protein to it. So, as we look at in terms of like, let's just not shove calories in these athletes' faces. Yes, they have a higher energy demand. They need a lot of calories. And in situations where maybe they're resistant, you might need to throw them a bone. But can you get something that's similar to a product they like? And there's that relationship component too. So, it's hard to toe this line between, I know what the RDs at these places are struggling with, but I also, I find it hard to believe that, and I hear it all the time, like, oh, I provided these meals for them. They're prepped, ready to go. I walk out of the facility, I just find them all in the trash can. I've talked to coaches, I've talked to dietitians about that too. So I know that it's happening. And so as much as possible, you gotta control the controllables. So I can only control when you're inside these four walls. So what's provided here is going to be the best quality, top tier. What you decide to do with your own time, and again, NIL adds a whole other layer to it in terms of what you have a ton of resources at your disposal if you have a huge NIL deal too. So, but again, I feel like I have the responsibility to not provide ultra processed foods, focus on whole foods, quality resources used with quality ingredients that aren't just gonna, potentially gum up systems and just cause more problems down the line, because there is a trade-off. Health and performance aren't mutual, they aren't necessarily the same. There is a trade-off of, you look at like offensive linemen, I'm going to sacrifice short-term health, potentially long-term health too. And in return, I'm going to have the opportunity to potentially provide generational wealth for my family. That's a huge trade-off. I would take that. Absolutely. So if you have to weigh the costs as an individual, as an athlete, but I do think as a dietitian, as a coach, you have the responsibility to, hey, can we get grass-fed options? Can we make sure our veggies, or every meal has veggies? We're not just relying on, pastas for carb loading and all that stuff. Can we look at rice, veggies, high quality proteins? I mean, really, if you have those three things, that's a really quality meal right there. And then you got to work on, hey, let's make sure we're not providing, we shouldn't have sodas right now. We should be hydrating. We need water. We don't need the added sugar of soda necessarily. You can look at sports drinks depending on the situation. But again, most of the sports drinks, like the conventional sports drinks, they're just fancy, they're fancy juices. That's what I tell my son. I'm like, you don't need Gatorade. So it's just, there's a lot of give and take, and I understand where people are coming from, but I do think we have the obligation because, in terms of as a coach or a dietitian, you are the frontline defense in terms of their long-term health, and the habits that you instill now can go a long way in terms of these athletes' health long down the line.
Mm-hmm. So when we look at maybe taking Rice Krispie treats versus eggs in the morning, I think we all could know that eggs is the better option. But even for someone that maybe thinks they're having that better option with eggs, and they're having eggs that are maybe pasture raised versus just, the cheapest ones at Walmart, is there really a difference between them in the short term, or is it maybe just like a more of a long-term difference that you'll see?
That's a really good question. And I think you got to look at it in terms of these pastured eggs, the environment they live in. It's more natural, and you can look at, there's a really good book on the subject. It's like zebras don't get ulcers because they're not stressed. They're just out in the wild. They have their fight or flight on. They can turn it off, and then when they're not running from a lion, they can turn it on and off. Like they can rest when they need to, but they can run when they need to too. And those stress hormones, when you're constantly stressed, it's going to have an impact in our bodies for sure, right? We're chronically stressed. We hear that all the time. Chronic stress is going to cause problems, going to raise inflammation, all this stuff. Think about that in terms of the food that you're eating. So if I have a caged chicken who's super stressed, not really allowed to live, I don't know. I don't want to instill these human feelings into an animal, like probably depressed. Like there's some level, like it's not right? We can get into the ethical question of it. Cause I know I've worked with a lot of vegans who are just like, yeah, I don't want to eat chickens that are pent up like that. It's like, yeah, I agree. Let's get some pasture raised ones who are allowed to live the way they're supposed to. And I've never had a vegan try that. And, because a lot of times vegans will go vegan, see some success, but then they're just so nutrient deficient that they struggle. They aren't seeing the clarity that they used to see. But when they went vegan, they just cut out a lot of the other junk. So then we added in eggs. Sometimes fish is okay for them, but like if you add those quality protein sources back in, they feel great. And I've never once had a vegan come start working with me. It's a slow process, but I don't know how, I know this is not necessarily a question, but I've never had a vegan come work with me. We slowly start to try it in, and they've never felt amazing after. Now, could that have also happened just adding conventional eggs? Maybe. And I think there's the cost analysis of it too. Like if your family can't just go buy pasture-raised eggs, I understand. You got to do the best for your situation. The grass-fed meat, all that, it is higher in the omega-3s. It's got a little bit better omega-3 omega-6 ratio. So, there is definite benefits to it. But if it's, go to Taco Bell or buy some just regular conventional ground beef, get the ground beef. And then if you can, you start to see the benefits. It's all slow. It's iterating. It's one habit at a time. And so, and it's different too when you're working someone one-on-one versus I'm in a large group setting. I have a budget, right? So you got to play around with your budget. If you have the funds, yeah, I'm absolutely always going to say you got to get grass-fed organic produce if you can. If you can't necessarily do organic produce, can we look at the Dirty Dozen and Clean 15? Because the Dirty Dozen is, they've been found to have a lot of pesticides on them. And there's a really good link between pesticide exposure and potential risk for cancer. So we want to eliminate that as much as we can. So if we're looking at in terms of our athletes, we should do what we can. We live in super stressful environments. There's a stress of school. There's a stress of athletes. Training is a stress. And the body doesn't know the difference between finals and training. So it all compounds. So if we're not giving the body the nutrients it needs, there's going to be detrimental effects short-term and definitely long-term too.
Big time. That's a great point. And that's actually going to jump us to our stat of the week. This comes from a peer-reviewed study from ScienceDirect.com that showed 1/3 of female college athletes and 1/2 of male college athletes at the Division I level were energy deficient during the regular season. And on top of that, Penn State University did a study that sports-related stress can significantly affect whether college athletes are eating, with many of them skipping meals not because the food's not available, but because they feel overwhelmed physically, emotionally, and mentally. So with that, in season, player load increases, academic stress ramps up, pressure to perform is higher than ever, and now these athletes might not even be eating or not at all. So even with a plan from a dietitian or a nutritionist, an athlete might not be hitting their caloric goals just because of what is going on in life. So when it comes to planning out an athlete's nutrition, his goals, what he's eating, how important is it for that nutritionist or for that dietitian to take into account what's actually going on the field and the academics and their classroom, just everything outside of when they're sitting down to eat?
Yeah, it's super important. That's a really good stat. And it's one of those things where, again, if we're looking at our role as coaches, as dietitians, as facilitators, we're not we want to win games. We want our athletes to be successful, but we also, we want to set them up for success long-term. So if that athlete's coming to me and I find out they're not eating, and there's a tracking side of it too, right? So I should probably be tracking body composition in some point, in some way, like an in-body, something like that. Bod pod. I know bod pod's super, it's cumbersome, right? It's time consuming. And in-body's pretty good. If you have force plates now, if you do peak power per body weight, you can track that metric, and or peak strength per body weight too, on an isometric mid-thigh pull. You can look at that, and that's going to give you trends on, okay, we're maintaining our muscle. And if we're maintaining our muscle, that's usually a pretty good sign we're eating enough, right? Especially if we adjust it for body weight. So if we start seeing that trend in the wrong direction, we have a red flag coming up. That person is not maintaining their muscle. Their immune system is probably going to be compromised. They might start getting sick. They might start getting injured. So that's a metric we can look at. And then, from there, maybe that's a meeting with the dietitian, hey, what's going on? And then that dietitian, should definitely take all those things into consideration. And then you got to give them, because you can pump, ChatGPT can spit out a meal plan in 2 seconds. That's not hard. The meal plan is not the hard part. It's the relationship building. It's okay, you're stressed. How can we manage that? Can you take 4 minutes a couple times a day to incorporate box breathing? if you've never heard of box breathing, here's what it is. Here's why it's important, especially during these stressful times. How's your sleep? Are you getting enough sleep? Do we need to work on time management to make sure your assignments, your projects, all that stuff are taken care of so that you can get to sleep? There's so many tools and things that go into, the relationship and the building and the prioritizing of the individual athlete that go so far beyond the meal plan. I can give you the perfect meal plan to send you out the door, but that's pretty worthless if you don't have the tools to handle the things that your day is throwing at you.
Big time. And I would say, as it kind of blew my mind being in this space now with nutritionists, that they're doing a great job at doing the body comp and their goals, and the DEXA scans is used a lot, but there's no look into what's going on in the strength side. They don't have they can't look into that data of the peak power, of the player load from the GPSs. Being able to, like as a dietitian, as a nutritionist, those are two of your biggest driving factors when it comes to making sure that your athletes are not just meeting their caloric intake, but they're matching what their goal is for the caloric intake. So if you were a nutritionist, your advice to nutritionists, how important would it be to be able to have access to that data and to be looking at that as part of their overall equation for fueling their athletes?
I think it's super huge. And obviously, I think it's pretty obvious I'm going to say that as a strength coach and a dietitian. As a strength coach, most of my questions were about nutrition. So it's very important as a staff, as an organization, that everyone is on the same page. You can't be siloed off, right? Because then, your strength coach is saying one thing about your dietitian, you go see the dietitian, they're saying another thing. The athlete's probably going to default to the person they see more and they trust more, which is usually a strength coach. So if you don't have a good relationship with your strength staff as a dietitian, you're starting off behind the 8 ball. So it's and it goes both ways, right? These strength staff should also have a good relationship with the dietitian. And, there's the hiring component. So, I've heard a lot of strength coaches say, I've never met a good collegiate dietitian, and that's not good, right? So that's something that absolutely, if you and your dietitian, your strength staff have a disconnect, maybe the strength staff should be a part of that hiring process. It comes down to the individual organization and how they hire, how they do all that stuff. But to sit here and say strength staff just handle strengths and then dietitian just handle dietitian, I think, it doesn't make sense. It's two sides of the same coin and they work together. And if one piece isn't there, it can have huge negative impacts or positive impacts if you get it right on the athlete, on the team, on the organization.
Big time. That's great insight for any sports department out there. Make sure that your departments, especially strength conditioning, nutrition, the dietitian, they aren't just living in separate silos.
Athletic training and return to play too. I mean, it's gotta be everyone. And I know it's hard and people get territorial, but I mean,
very territorial. This is my data.
Yeah, this is my data. This is my time. I'm the return to play guy. You can't touch it. All right, well, I mean, you're just I get it. Stay in your lane, but I know a little bit about a lot, and I know a lot about a little bit. Does that make sense? Makes sense.
Like it. Love it. Let's transition into now. This is going to bring us to our segment, our sudden change segment. This sudden change is brought to you by Niko Stones. You don't need 100 pieces to look put together. You just need the right ones. Niko Stones just relaunched with their new Essentials collection, designed for everyday style, bold textures, smooth lines, pieces that just work. Whether you're dressed up or dressed down, go check it out at nikostones.com. So let's shift gears. What's one of the biggest differences that you see training for a sport, training for performance on the field, to now once they hang up the cleats, once they hang up the shoulder pads, training for overall health when they're not playing a sport? What are the two main differences there?
Well, I think one big difference is if you look at, as an athlete, you have a thing you are trying to peak for, whether that's postseason, whether that's some sort of culminating event in track and field or a certain meet that you're trying to peak for. I know that I want to be at my best on this time, at this time of year, at this day, that sort of thing. So if we look at it in terms of longevity, I want to be able to do the things I want to do with the people I love forever, and so that's a major difference. There's no endpoint on health. And I would say another major one is you stop doing athletic stuff. And I saw this a lot because I coached at a high school for some time, and, we would do fundraisers, and it would usually be something athletic, like a basketball fundraiser would do a staff basketball game or like a staff dodgeball game. So I would do these events, and I would, I keep doing athletic stuff because I think it's very important. And so I would go through, I'd be fine. And all the other staff would be like, "Hey, are you sore? Like super sore, like that beat me up." Like, no, I'm fine. Like it's just another day for me, because I prioritize. I'm still jumping. I'm still throwing. It looks different. It's not going to look exactly the same as it did when you're an athlete, especially the older you get. But the longer you can maintain that, the longer you can maintain, your strength, your grip strength, your mobility, your cardiovascular health, those are all key indicators of longevity. So if you can maintain those as long as possible, you're going to set yourself up for success. I can't tell you how many times I've seen like, oh, I haven't played basketball, and then, I tore my ACL in a pickup basketball game. One of the coaches on staff told me that too. She didn't do it, but someone she knew did. It's like, well, how much, is she doing? Is she still training? Is she doing? No. She just joined this pickup basketball league. Like, all right, well,
There you go.
So those would be the two.
Yeah. I know for me, training pretty much my entire life for a sport, the intensity was very high, the velocity was very high, the energy was very high. Now being an adult outside of sports, going to the gym and doing functional movements and things like that, in the beginning, it didn't really feel like I was doing anything, or I didn't feel like that sense of accomplishment because I wasn't going balls to the wall like I did for 10 years training for a sport. But now it's like the objective has changed. Just like you said, we're not running through people or tackling people. We want to be able to play ball with our kids for the rest of our life and be able to stand up straight and not have a hunchback and be able to move. And if there is a pickup game, if there is a 7-on-7, if there is a softball, we're not being taken to the hospital after. So what are some of the most common mistakes you see adults making that are former athletes when getting maybe back into a routine?
I would say the biggest one is like just going balls to the wall. Like you said, 0 to 100, I'm just going for it. And I think we don't think about it as athletes, especially if you have a really good strength staff, like when it's being dialed back and when it's being ramped up. Like you just go to train. So like you have someone who's taking care of all that thinking for you, where you just go to crush it. And so I started, that's the idea behind the Forge, is this group I started for dads. And I train dads, like I say we're creating dad athletes, right? It's just dads who can do all that stuff, be strong, look good, be mobility, and then be mobile, have mobility, and just do the things they want to do with people they want to do. And so the way we do it, it's very different from, like, again, in the athletic scene, you have that end date. But so how can we manage training in a way that, we can do this forever, essentially? So we train in two categories of training blocks. It's accumulation and intensification. So intensification, that's like your strength, power, very nervous system driven. And then your accumulation, that's very much like your muscular endurance. It's hypertrophy, it's stuff like that. And so we train in 4-week blocks where we just alternate between those two. So where one system's working, the other is resting. And then within that, within those 4 weeks, we set it up in a way that we ramp up from, slowly from 0 to 100, where that first week, I call it a refresh week. You're probably leaving 6, 7, 8 reps in the tank. You might leave that day, like you said, feeling like, hey, I didn't do very much. But that's very much intentional, because the week before you should have absolutely sent it. And so then, weeks 2 and 3, those are what we call load weeks. So from there, you're pushing up the intensity. The weights are starting to get bumped up 5 to 10% each week. And then week 4, you just go, like, this is it, whatever we're doing. And, it looks different too. Like, we're not doing, we're not 1 rep maxing at the end of the off season or whatever, but I do want to know your 3 rep max with a 4.0 exo tempo on a rear foot elevated split squat with dumbbells, that type of thing. So in terms of whatever we have on the training card, like, you're still gonna hit PRs. You're absolutely gonna still hit PRs. And it may be conventional PRs. Like, we got guys all the time, like, yeah, I've never lifted this much, or I haven't lifted this much since college. And that's amazing. And I love to see that. But it's also like, oh, I've never rear foot elevated split squatted that heavy ever. And it's like, yeah, that's awesome. That's PR. So you got to find creative ways to PR, and creative ways to keep it fun and engaging too, right? So if you're in an accumulation block, maybe you finish with like 1 set of 50 or 1 set to failure or something, where you're just gutting it out. Because I do think there is that level, like, we're athletes, we're hard charters. We want to do hard stuff. So you have to be able to put that in there in a way that we can all do it, for one, but we're also doing it in a way that's smart, that ramps up intelligently, where, again, you don't have to think about it. You just have to go in there and get after it, stay within these guidelines on every single week, and you're absolutely going to be successful.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I love about what you do as well, is like the community and the accountability. So not only are they just getting a workout, like you said in the beginning, you can just go get a workout in ChatGPT. Is it as good as yours? Probably not, but it still gives you something. That doesn't get you the full way. Having that sense of community, having that sense of accountability to now be able to show up, just execute what you put on that card, you're held accountable. I think that that's a huge thing. Like the mental side that former athletes are missing now. We were held accountable for everything that we did. Now as athletes, it kind of relies more, or now as adults, it kind of relies more on yourself. So how important is now this sense of community and this sense of accountability when it comes to getting back into a routine like that?
The community is absolutely huge. I think, no one could ever agree on the perfect diet, but one thing, the Cincinnatians have in common is they do have a strong sense of community. They're staying active, all that. So as we look at it in terms of like, how can I foster this community? So many of us, I hear it on almost every call I have. It's like, this is like being back on the football team. This is like being on a team. I've been more consistent with my workouts just because I know other dads in the group, they're going through the same thing. They don't want to train. They got kids. It's hard to find time. And so I also build it in there so where it's designed to be flexible. Hey, if you can only give me 30 minutes, here's exactly what you do. If you can give me the full hour, here's exactly what you do. If you can only train 2 days a week, here's exactly what you do. Taking the guesswork out of it and then making it as flexible as possible, because we do have lives outside of the gym. We aren't athletes anymore where that's our whole thing. That's what we do. That's what we love. And we do still love it. But so many of them are saying it's like being back in that locker room. I was on a call last week with one of our dads. He's like, yeah, I trained 16 weeks straight for the first time since being an athlete. And we know consistency is the biggest driver of results. So if we can find ways to stay consistent, stay accountable to each other, to the other dads in the group, even for me, right? I'm the coach. And I can't tell you how many times it's very easy for me as the coach to be like, yeah, I'll just get it tomorrow. Because especially on the floor, 8 hours, 8 groups a day. But now, you have these athletes who are relying on you. I need to set the example. Now these dads are relying on me. I'm supposed to be the leader of the group. I'm supposed to set the example. I better not take a day off. I better follow my own advice here and make sure, okay, I'm time crunched. I better hit the 30 minutes, or I better split this exactly how I would. I try to come across to myself exactly how I would approach a dad in our community. We do have a community. We have a group chat. It's a lot of fun too. And that's another thing also is we keep it fun. Like, yeah, we're talking about serious stuff, screen time, different parenting styles. We talk about all that. Nothing is off limits as long as we're respectful, all that stuff. If you've read Legacy, we definitely go by the no dickheads rule. Sorry if that's not allowed on your pod, but if you've read Legacy, it's a really good rule, right? It's simple. It's easy to follow. Like if you can follow that rule, you're going to get along great in the group, right? So we keep it fun. We're sending gifts all the time. And that's just another level of like engagement, right? Like, oh, this isn't just training nutrition, because I help them with their nutrition, make sure they're set up with like meal, because I do that. Like, I'm not going to sit here and spit on meal plans. Like, yeah, we got to do it, but we got to be smart. We got to help them change one habit at a time. How's their sleep? And it's all housed in a single app where I can track everything. It just kind of like I would as a Division I strength coach, right? I can see their sleep data, I can see their steps, I can see their training consistency, the weights they're lifted, as if they're logging their nutrition, I can see all that. And I have this dashboard that's built where I can track all that. They get in on a check-in. We go through their KPIs. Okay, here's where we need to focus for the next month. Let's change this one thing. Where you're not hitting your protein goal. We need to find a way to get that. Can we add a protein shake to breakfast or whatever it is? Do you need a supplement? What do we have to do to help you be successful?
Very cool. Very cool. So let's dive into the nutrition side. We talked about the difference between the physical, the importance of the mental. Now on the nutrition, former athletes, you can't eat like you're an athlete still. You're burning 2,000-3,000 calories a day. Pasta nights, just to fuel for the next 30-minute workout is not necessarily a thing anymore. So what's the biggest shift that former athletes now trying to get back into a routine need to make when it comes to their diet?
Yeah, and I know there's a big move on like anti-food tracking and like healthy relationships with food and intuitive eating. But like if you're eating like crap, I don't know your podcast rules. I'm trying to keep it clean. If you're eating like crap, your intuition is going to be off. You're going to have bad intuition. So intuitive eating is off the table. So we do food track. We track our food. And it depends on where the person is at. If we meet and they're like, I've never tracked food before, I don't want to do this. All right, well, can you track your protein? If you can give me 1 gram per pound of body weight, let's just start there. Don't track anything else, track that. And then from there, we'll come in our next check-in, either they're hitting it or they're not, or they're ready for the next thing. Like, okay, what's our veggie intake like? Okay, good. Let's either add a veggie to lunch, let's pick a meal, let's add a veggie to it. And we're just slowly, brick by brick, building in those habits. But it's the same, but it's different as being an athlete. You still have to fuel for those workouts, because I see a lot like, oh, I'm just going to cut out all carbs, or I'm going to go keto, or I'm going to fast. And then they crash, and then they get hurt, and then their consistency is tanked. Like, let's not fear entire food groups. Let's just be smart about what we're taking in and when we're taking it in. And so during our check-ins, that's exactly what we'll hammer based off of the need of the individual. But it is very similar, I would say, to when you're an athlete. Like, if I remember the West Point locker room, had like the plate, and it was like, 2 to 3 fists of veggies, 2 to 3 palms of protein, 2 to 3 cupped hands of carbs. It's very similar. Just the amounts you need are different. So like you said, you can't go hammer the same amount of food as you did when you were an athlete and expect the same results, because you're not an athlete. You're probably sitting at a desk. You're not as active. You're training only a couple times a week, which is fine. We can still see really great results on 2 days a week straight training if you're smart with your nutrition. You aren't dialed in Monday through Friday and then just let the weekends just go nuts, because those days got to be dialed in too. And no one's ever going to be perfect, but we can always be purposeful. That's my big message, is don't expect perfection, but always be purposeful with what you're trying to do, what you're putting into your body, because it all compounds, right? Those 3 days on the weekend, if you tank those 3 days, you're getting a C- on your health. That's not good. So what can we do to get that up to a B, a B+, an A-? And if we can get to that 90% whole foods, 90% consistency, eating really good food, we have a little bit more wiggle room. It's not to say like don't enjoy ice cream with your family, because again, what's the point of doing this and being healthy if you're not going to enjoy life? So there's also that side of things. And so many times I've seen dads just want too fast, too much too soon, burn out, crash and burn, and then they're just like, screw it, I'm done. And then they go off the rails, and then they, maybe they made some progress, but then they balloon back up. But if we can find ways to do it consistently and just make it a part of who you are, and that's another big issue with like these challenges, these 90-day challenges. If you say this challenge is so many days, you've just given yourself the endpoint. But health doesn't have an endpoint. So if you're successful in those 75 days or those 90 days or whatever, then you just go back to doing what you're doing. You're going to be right where you were before you started in no time. So it has to be an entire shift in terms of who you are, what you prioritize, why you started in the first place. And that's a big thing I try to hammer with these guys, is like, why do you want this? Because if you don't have a strong why, and you're saying, I want to look good. I'm like, okay, yeah, we all want to look good, but why is it important that you look good? And then you just keep hammering it down. It's like, my dad died when he was 50 from a heart attack. I don't want to do that. It's like, great. I don't want that for you either, but I need you to latch onto that, because when stuff gets hard, you need to remember why you started this.
Right. That's so important. Travis Taylor from the University of Tennessee came on last week and was talking about how just getting to know those simple goals of being able to now coach him better. And if you were, as a nutritionist, putting a meal plan together, saying, hey, or a strength plan, hey, here it is, here's our templated one, go figure it out. You're asking him why you want to do this. Do you want to look good? Is it longevity? And then now you're using that to motivate. I think that's super big and super important. Let's go to supplements now. What should people be taking in terms of supplementation? You go to the store and there's like just so many different supplements. And I actually recently got a gene test done from Gary Brecka at the 10X thing, in hopes of maybe of giving me what my body needs in terms of supplements. The end result, they told me to just buy their supplements, their 10X supplements. So I was like, what a waste. But in terms of supplementation, what should fans and people be looking at to add to their diet, if anything at all?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think you brought up a really good point in terms of like gene testing and specific stuff for genes. As I understand it, the gene specifics is not there to where we can start. It probably will get there, but right now where we're at the time of this recording, it's not there where we can get super dialed in specific stuff to your genes. Now, blood tests, on the other hand, That's a different story. A blood test can give you absolutely give you insight into what you need, but also you can't just throw supplements at a lifestyle problem, right? So there are some I recommend that most people would probably benefit from. Just a good multivitamin, magnesium. Most of us are deficient. We're super stressed. We burn through magnesium, especially if we're training hard too. So magnesium is one, and then just a good multi. If you get creatine, a good multi, and then some magnesium, that's probably a pretty good foundational stack, I would say. And then, everyone hears creatine and they're like, oh yeah, it'll just get you stronger. But there's so many more benefits to creatine now that are coming out. It's super well researched. Neurocognitive benefits, neuroprotective benefits. A big one for the population that I work with is dads. It's like sleep deprivation. A lot of us have kids, especially young kids. I got baby number 2 on the way. So I got to be able to, potentially, if you go a higher dose of creatine, you could potentially offset some of the effects of that sleep deprivation. And so as you look at supplements you're picking, it should answer or solve a problem is the way I'm trying to say it. So it should solve some sort of problem. So like in terms of creatine, just trying to be neurocognitively proficient as long as possible, make sure my brain's taken care of. And yes, of course, I get the benefits from the performance side as well. And then, you could even turn it to if you are sleep deficient, we'll just keep it on this goal. For example, you can look at something like synapsin from Metabolic Elite. That's going to be something that helps turn on the glial cells in the brain, help clean out the trash, and just keep you sharp. It helps you cognitively, but it's not a stimulant. And so obviously there's caffeine as well. That's one that's well researched, but you got to look at it in terms of probably not in the afternoon, because then your sleep's going to be tanked, and not with a bunch of sugar. Like if you go to Starbucks and you just order that super sweet caramel macchiato, yeah, just load it up. Like you don't like coffee at that point. You like dessert, and like I don't blame you. I like dessert too. But can we get like a black cold brew or something with like a little bit of heavy cream in there? That's a way different, nutrient profile than that caramel 7-pump caramel macchiato, right? But I mean, in terms of other supplements, like I said, we're having a hard time hitting our protein goal. Let's look at adding a protein supplement there. But we don't want, and you'll never out supplement just bad habits. So I always ask, like, how's your sleep? What's your nutrition look like now? So, I mean, if you're not getting a nutrient dense, eating the rainbow, whole food focused diet, we could throw supplements at it and maybe it'll help. But you also got to look at the, people who take supplements tend to live longer. And then in the research, it's more of a chicken or the egg situation. Good question. Does it matter? I don't know. Like, are you just healthier because someone who takes supplements makes better health choices? Maybe. Or are the supplements actually helping? Also maybe. But I mean, either way, we can definitely use that to our advantage. Like, okay, I'm invested in my health. Maybe you just start with that foundational stack. That's where I'm going to start. And then, but you also have to look at the quality of the supplement. So if you haven't heard by now, don't buy your supplements off Amazon, because and I know Amazon is working on this, but there's been really good research. So like what's on the label and what's in the bottle are not always the same on Amazon. And I know Amazon's trying to crack down on it, but that's something you have to really be careful of. So you should be buying from reputable brands who third-party tests, who can give you, some sort of purity test, who can guarantee what's on this label is what's in the bottle. So that's something to also consider as well.
Yeah, and that doesn't even sound like Amazon's fault. It just sounds like that's their business model, and anyone can sell this stuff, and who knows like where the source of that is actually coming from. Wow, that's kind of scary. What's your opinion on melatonin at night?
It probably has a time and a place. I don't think you want I'm not of the belief that you should supplement melatonin. Now, if you're going across time zones, especially west to east is usually harder. So that might be a situation where you do want to use melatonin. But Spoken Nutrition actually is probably one of the best sleep supplements that I've found. There's no melatonin. It's like theanine, glutamine, magnesium, just things that are going to relax you. And, if you can't sleep, you have insomnia, all that, you probably also need to look at your lifestyle. If you're tired but wired, you can't turn your brain off. That's me. I can't do that some nights. You got to be able to get parasympathetic, bring it back to that box breathing a couple times a day, something like that, where, again, let's not try to out supplement a lifestyle problem. But in a certain situation, like, yeah, I'm going west to east, or we're playing in London this week. So I have to get adjusted super quick. That might be a situation where you do some melatonin, you get outside, do some grounding, get natural sunlight, get on their schedule as fast as possible. But it's just going to depend on the situation. I've also seen like super high dose melatonin in certain instances, like way high, but like just to manage overall inflammation and get that tamped out. So, it's not a never thing, but it's got to be tied to a specific goal, a specific purpose.
Gotcha. Not just a never. That should not be part of your lifestyle. Is what you're saying.
Yeah. If you're relying on melatonin to go to sleep, we got to look at something else because something's off somewhere.
Very good. Very good. Well, Corey, this has been an awesome conversation. Is there anything else that you want to enlighten the fans on when it comes to health, performance, nutrition, strength training, anything?
No, I mean, thanks for having me on. Consistency is the biggest driver. It's quality over quantity every single time, I think wins. And if you're a dad looking for an awesome community that feels like being an athlete again, check out The Forge, entertheforge.org, or you can follow me on Instagram, Coach Corey Hobbs. But we'd love to have you. We're just looking for awesome dads. A lot of times as former athletes, former military guys, just because they realize how important it is to have that community. And when you leave, it almost just gets turned off. Like you go from having this built-in brotherhood, this built-in community, to just basically being out on your own. And sometimes, you get lucky, for us, like you get stationed with some of your friends, but then, people get out, they go their separate ways, and that community just kind of dwindles until it's just you. And I know this happened with me too. So we lived all over. It was in Tennessee, Arizona, Texas, Oklahoma. When we finally landed in Arizona, we're like, okay, this is where we're going to be, but I didn't have a community. And we're slowly starting to get that with our area, just meeting people, which is awesome. But not a lot of former athletes who are hard chargers and want to get after a little bit and stay healthy and set the example for their kids. So I reached out to a couple of our former teammates and I was like, hey, I got this idea. And like, yeah, I'm in. This is amazing. So, if you need that community, I think we all need that community. The Forge is great. I can't recommend it enough, obviously, right? But so many of us are like, yeah, this is like being back in the locker room on a team in a brotherhood, and it's awesome. So if that's something you need, I definitely recommend checking it out. But that's all I got.
That's awesome. Folks, go check him out. That's, again, entertheforge.org. He's on Instagram. He's also on LinkedIn, posts a lot of really good stuff. That wraps this episode up of the Gridiron Unfiltered. Thank you again to Corey for taking us on a deeper dive into the world of sports performance. I'm your host, Danny Davis. Be sure to subscribe to the Fan Day Nation so you don't miss out on future episodes. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.